on how people identify. Teaching marketing and business and some of the other stuff I work in is how you can, if in the business world, if you can get someone to take on that identity
Yeah.
of they're going to wear all your stuff, they identify. And like you watch your NFL teams and NBAs, when someone goes to work on Monday, they talk we, like, well, we played good yesterday, or they insert themselves if they're part of the
Absolutely.
organization.
Yeah.
Lifelong
I
fans.
yeah, and I always call buddies on that, like, "Oh, and then what did you do when you came up to bat?"
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How was your turn? Yeah.
Exactly.
No, that's that is and like you said, to speak to that, and I just enjoy the variety, seeing different things, going to
Yeah.
experiencing. I've never been a big hunter, never been a big fisher, but I have friends that own every trinket known to
Yeah.
man that's going to give them that edge in the water or in the blind. And
Look, I don't hunt either, and I always think it's crazy with all this stuff that these guys have. So I don't hunt, but I live near woods, and I can tell you I have like tripped over deer in the woods at night while I'm smoking a cigar,
yeah,
and you're telling me you're going to cover yourself with piss, you know, you're going to wear these colors? Like, come on, man, these are stupid creatures. I don't know. You know better than I do, the hunters out there, but like, dude, I've literally tripped over them. So,
they're
and
it's the same way in our neighborhood. I live inside the city limits, so they're not hunted. And we my son calls it. We have the opportunity. You heard farm to table. We have the opportunity to go yard to table.
yeah,
So we just
absolutely.
say we walk
Slide
outside
the
in the morning.
window,
Yeah,
slide
yeah,
the kitchen window.
yeah. There's like 6 deer every morning just hanging out in my front yard. They'll like look at me when I go out.
That's
Yeah, it's
fantastic.
crazy. Let me tell everybody, man. I retooled Eric, and I went down, did a bunch of research, took some time off from podcasting, and stumbled upon the term operator syndrome. And you're the first guest that booked with me. I had a few people reach out, and I'm like, you don't fit the mold, and
Mm,
you're absolutely one of the first guests that I'm going to have that just walks through your career, and different things. And so that's kind of the theme of what the Jeff Robertson show is taking on moving forward is high performers in law enforcement, public safety, firefighters, um, folks with a background of just dealing with other people's stuff for long amounts of times. And I stumbled upon it just kind of walking through my own journey, and I found Chris Fruh, I think was his name. He's a military guy that had done a bunch of research on it. Um, I've actually reached out for him as well. He's got a book out that kind of details it. And I did a blog article on it and sent it out to a bunch of friends, and they were like, "Hey, this is good. This is something here." So, man, I retooled my whole podcast setup. And folks, today I'm joined by Eric Robertson, a retired FBI agent, former Baptist minister, SWAT operator, and author of the upcoming book Irreverend: From Saving Souls to Chasing Sinners in the FBI. Eric's path took him from the pulpit to some of the most challenging investigations in the country, including drugs, gangs, crimes against children, white collar, national security. Through it all, he discovered that compassion, curiosity, and genuine human connection often became his most effective tools. Man, I'm excited because I'm with you on that. I think genuine human connection is absolutely one of the best tools that I found in my law enforcement and public safety career as well. But welcome, man. Thanks for being with me today. I'm excited to hear more
yeah.
about you and your book and what's going on in your world.
I am now retired, so I mowed the lawn the other day. That was cool. Helped my kid. Yeah. So my kids, move out. So now I'm the handyman. It doesn't pay well. In fact, I usually leave money for them when I go over and take care of stuff. But it's been good. It's nice that I'm still fresh from the FBI, so keeping in touch with my buddies. But uh, now I'm reflecting on, wow, that was crazy that I got to do that because I was that Baptist pastor. I didn't have any experience in law enforcement. Never handled a gun, and yet years later I was a person training FBI agents to be better shooters.
Yeah.
So pretty big move, big change. If I'd have gone back in time and told 27-year-old me that, first thing 27-year-old me would go, You look good, man, for an old guy. Nice. But then also I would say like, that's crazy. There's no way that's going to happen. But it did.
I will tell you an observation going through police academy with a couple, and I remember one that stood out, very serious in his religion of just wanting to be a better helper, but struggled in the officer survival, the gun side, and the
Mm,
the dangerous side of law enforcement. He struggled there because it
mm,
was he was not in his views and in his beliefs. He was not there to he had a hard time when it come to pulling the trigger, basically. And so I'm curious on that. Like most people see that ministry and FBI as completely different worlds. But how was you able to bridge that maybe? And then how did you discover they're actually the same?
Well, I think there's two parts to that. And the one is, I mean, it was easy right off the bat that I could see, obviously, in the church, I'm doing God's work, but that law enforcement is also God's work. When I was in Chicago, I worked employee assistant. I headed that up, the program. And so I worked with the chaplains, and one of our Catholic priests was a chaplain, and he reaffirmed something that I thought was true. But he said, "Oh, I've been doing this for 30 years. This is absolutely God's work, because the church can do a lot of things for you, but if you're harmed, your family member's harmed, like, they can have a potluck, they can raise money, pray for you, but they can't get you justice." And that is something I believe God wants for people. He wants them to have justice, and so I was very fortunate to be able to be part of that too.
Yeah, no doubt. So starting out, you're coming up through life and end up in ministry
Yeah.
before FBI, right?
Be
I could totally see that happening backwards, but in my
a lot
head,
of
right, and
times.
just how
Yeah.
watching the guys I know how they've flown through their career or flowed through their career, I could see that. Walk us through that. How did that come about for you? How did you get entered into becoming a minister, and then step us into what that looked like to get you to the FBI.
Getting into ministry was the usual as far as like becoming a pastor. I was a youth pastor, then assistant pastor, and then senior pastor when I planted a church. But my wife and in college, I had studied Islam and had been trained, and then in graduate school to be a missionary to Muslim countries. So I went through that process. I had that background. Instead of going overseas, we had some family issues, so my wife and I said, "Well, let's stay here and we'll enter into ministry more typical." So we had a church that I planted in Western New York that was based on outreach and grace. So I took a small group, we started a new church, and I said, "Are you able to welcome someone in our church without a flinch that got tattoos, weird piercings, not dressed for church, gay couple, smells like, alcohol in the breath. Like, are you able to honestly embrace these people? And if we make any mistakes, we're going to make mistakes on the side of grace." And by all measures, we were doing well. We were successful. People were coming in, numbers were good, lives were being changed. That's awesome. That's what we want. But I lacked the capacity to separate myself from other people's problems.
Mm,
And so, nothing nothing special about what I was facing. I just people's problems became my own, and so I ended up having stress-related headaches every single day without fail, every day for 2 years, and just told my wife, I gotta do something different. I gotta find a job with less stress. How about the FBI?" And so,
that's right.
and it was just different. I mean, obviously there's stress, but it was different. Didn't affect me the same. So I applied to the FBI. Internet internet was pretty new. It was around enough where I could download like 60 pages of the form to fill out by hand, but otherwise, um, my application was in process. 9/11 hits. They look at this guy who studied Islam. Um, we've got an Al Qaeda problem, and
Yeah.
so I think that's why they might have taken a chance on me.
I mean, just knowledge in general. Speaking to that, like coming through around that same time, I was doing task force work in 9/11, and I grew up in around Methodist and Southern Baptist, right? So we didn't have a ton of exposure just to the religion as a whole. So
Right.
I get even working inside the federal task force. Then it wasn't like we had, hey, let's go to the guy. Let's all jump on the call. It wasn't like, hey, here's a video for you to watch. It was
Yeah.
right. It wasn't. It was a lot of unknowns, I guess is the best way. So time wise, man, you're coming up through um, preaching in late '90s and then jumping in the FBI there right around 9/11. Wow,
Yeah.
man, what a
Yeah.
time to go in.
I got in April 2002. My application was in the process before 9/11, but now they're like, okay, we're going to speed this up, and they
Yeah,
brought me in. And of course, U.S. government, they're the wisest people in the world. They take this guy who studied Islam and they put me on a drug squad.
yeah, yeah. That is something that's very common within your federal. Yeah, let's take him out of everything he knows and put him in something we won't think he can be good at. Yes,
Yeah,
right.
but it was great for me because then right off the bat, I was getting to learn criminal work, working dope
Yeah,
right off the bat. We're on wiretap, learning how to do these deals. I was still kind of young, so running and gunning and
yeah.
getting that excitement. And then later, like, okay, I've had enough of the late nights and all the weekends. Let's settle down a little bit.
But you're right on that. Just to expose you to techniques, you landed in a good spot. I feel like
Yep.
during that time, um, because they quickly moved they quickly moved drugs under basically Homeland Security and support of terrorism. So once it was that designation, it opened up a lot of what you say, apply the Patriot Act and some other means in there as well. So like you're landing in a time because you didn't have to work pre. I wasn't did a lot of pre work under the old like systems or whatever. So um, but I could see them putting you there and how that accelerated just your knowledge and your all the
Yeah.
things. Being able to go
Right.
get warrants, right? Just being able to walk through, understand because you get so many, and
Yeah.
you're rolling through paper like crazy.
No, absolutely. And I got back to working counterterrorism, yeah, 15, 16 years later. They just, here we go. Now we'll put you back there. And the whole time it was nothing about expertise. It was always just, hey, we need a body.
Yeah.
So needed a body on the dope squad. Here you go. Need a body on counterterrorism. Here you go. That's fine. I'll be a good soldier.
Well, what city did you get to work in?
Started in Chicago and
Oh,
then then I moved back home. I'm
yeah,
from Toledo, Ohio area.
yeah.
So that's Cleveland division. We had the top half of the state. So the last, let's see, 16 years in Toledo.
Yeah, that's too cool, man. You mentioned something about this carrying the headaches and that's this unwanted ability to take on other people's problems as your own,
Mhm.
and I share that, and I struggled with that for years until I finally I had some friends, and you're talking less than 10 years of people that helped me kind of turn the corner with that it's like, hey man, you're and I wanted to point that out to our fellow folks. That's one of the things as operators that you have this tendency to do is you try to carry that burden in the world on your shoulders, and you're always trying to help or figure things out for people, and that's tough. I'm curious, and I'll share with you the way I kind of my friend gave me the advice, and she goes, Jeff, when you're talking to someone and it starts to become, and you start to feel that kind of energy change, or you're starting to feel it's like imagine yourself in a bubble. And I was like, all right. And so I took a picture of myself, and then I went to Canva and I put myself in a bubble. And I'm like, is this what you're talking about? And she's like, yeah. And I go, all right. So now I got a visual. And then she would I had another person came along and said I would if it got like a hard conversation, I would say, hey, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. We're gonna leave that right here. and we're
Hmm.
gonna let that energy kind of dissipate into the atmosphere here. It's not yours and it's definitely not mine, but thank you for sharing it. Those are the things I still have to do those to the day if it gets pretty deep. You'll see me if you ever gets in a deep conversation, I'll walk off after it's done and I'll just quietly say, like, hey, thank you for letting me have that conversation, but those problems aren't mine. We're gonna let that. How did you figure out to manage that?
Well, it just was different. So, I mean, obviously, part of being a pastor is I have to care. You're
Yeah.
supposed to. And I was still fairly young. I didn't have anyone mentoring me. I was on my own as the pastor. So there's nothing, I didn't have someone to take that to where they can say, oh, this is how you do that. This is how you address those types of issues. So in the FBI, I just had to be a good agent. I didn't have to be a perfect person. I didn't have to be somebody who was like performing in some way. I just had to follow through and work investigations. And different from what you're saying for me is like when we would run into victims where we're dealing with those situations. I knew it wasn't my role to now have to care about them afterwards. And
Yeah.
it might sound harsh, but even when we were working with these runaway teens who were being prostituted, like we were trying to help them and find a place where they could be safe after, but also that wasn't my job. My job was I could feel successful because okay, we arrested this pimp. Boom. That's what I do. So now I could feel a solution and a resolution. But then the way that we would handle those traumas would be talking about them. We'd tell stories. I mean, guys are always telling the stories and we tell these stories and I saw this meme, it just popped up again the other day, which is crazy. If you would tell some of these stories to the public, I'm trying to tell you a funny story and, somebody look at you and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, that must have been traumatic." You're like, "No, I was trying to be funny." And that's the way it is. Like in retrospect, yeah, it was traumatic. And the way we would deal with it is to not just leave it in, but like speak it out loud, give it life so that it can be confronted, even if it is told in the manner of, "Oh my gosh, do you remember when that crazy thing happened and we almost all died?"
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but we're here.
You're spot on that. And me and John Mattingly's talked a little bit about that. Of John and me, I didn't go outside of my network to have those conversations because when I did, I got in trouble because they
Yeah.
were too much.
Yeah,
Right? When
the
you
and the folks they don't get it, like, they're not speaking your
right.
language, they haven't shared that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we stayed, and I told him it's one of the mistakes I made was I stayed in my tribe too much. I didn't get outside of. I didn't have the nice thing when you get outside of just your core workers. There's somebody along there that goes, "Hey, wait a minute, you guys, what y'all are doing is you're drinking too much. You're desensitizing way overly to the moments and stuff." But you're right, and that's another thing is where we all tend to withdraw in and
Mhm.
keep those conversations internal. And a lot of times we don't find the way to flush them out of the room because they remain inside of our group there. Um, that's I've definitely I tell people all the time is if you actually knew some of the stuff that went on,
Mhm.
you would totally be mind blown. And some of the stuff you see on TV, like it's not quite, but maybe it's close, right? So it's people live a very naive life sometimes to what goes on in their communities.
Yeah, and part of it too is it's less shocking to the first responders because at least for us, for me, like we've been wading in that water already, and so like we're a little accustomed to it. Like it's not like I grab my aunt who's never seen this stuff and I pull her cold into like, hey, here's a child sex offender. We're gonna interact with him. Like that would be traumatic for us. We're like, yeah, I've been looking at this guy for a while. I know this stuff. You know, we've had cases on dudes like him before, so we've had a chance to wade into this and get accustomed to the temperature.
Yeah, that's all right. So my other curiosity is identity. How long was you a pastor? And then when you went into FBI, how long had you vested into being into your pastor son?
About 12 years. And
Right, long
it,
time, Eric. Right,
it
so
was.
I'm talking. All right, so I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just want to point out long enough to create pastoral habits.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and you have an identity that's set up for that, and then we take off the pastor hat, put on the FBI hat. What does that look like for you?
Well, and that's why I pushed so hard for 2 years. Like, I mean, obviously you get the headaches. You're like, hey, what's the problem? Now it's going on. These won't go away. But it wasn't a short. I learned pretty quickly. Like, oh man, this is stress, and yet I kept going because well, I'm supposed to be a pastor. Like, this is what I'm called to. This is what I'm good at. I'm gonna do this for 50 years. I'm gonna be an old man doing this. I can't be an old man being a SWAT operator because my back can't take it. But I could do this forever. So that was part of not being afraid to step out of that. So what if I make a mistake? And I didn't really think this, but like, what if I'm not doing what God wants me to do?
Yeah,
Like, He's not going to punish me, but what if this is God's will and I go, oh, I don't want to do this anymore? And it just came to the point where I can't hold my breath anymore. I can't keep doing this. I have to move on. So there's that. I get in, well, the day I got accepted in the FBI, headache stopped. So and I remember, I mean, honestly thinking, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to fight this anymore. And it was just now I'm at ease. And then 24 years in the FBI, dude, that I've had many colleagues along the way retire. I go, oh, that guy was a good guy. And then a few years ago, an actual close friend in the FBI retires. And then now I'm confronted like, oh man, that's gonna be me soon. And he went from being the best shot in the Cleveland division,
yeah,
best shooter, to a guy.
yeah.
And I go, John, man, SWAT guys want to know what you're up to. Tell me a story so I can pass it on to him. He was like, yeah, watching the grandkids. Yeah, what else, man? Enjoying life. And I'm like, how? Like, you were a badass. You're just sitting around doing, you know, grandpa stuff.
Yes.
And then it came to me like, okay, that's going to be me soon. And I had an existential crisis of what's going to happen when I'm not that guy, when I'm not an FBI agent, I'm not a SWAT operator anymore. And I was worried, like, man, what happens if I'm like depressed every single day because my identity is given up?
Yeah, that's a big one. Identity, I call it a Rambo moment. You're used to operating $1 million equipment, and next thing you know, you're getting passed in line trying to get a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And your sirens are going by, and you are standing by. You're just watching everything unfold, making sure that you can get to your car and get the crap out of there, so you're not in the middle of the melee. Those are tough. But here we are. And how long have you been retired now?
About 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
So, folks, I didn't hit record fast enough, but he was engaged in a lively game of Scrabble.
Yeah,
And
that's what I do.
When we came on, he was punishing someone with his Scrabble skills. But all right, tell me how you feeling now. Like, have you got you're 3 months removed from a 24-year career, dude. How's the days going now?
So I underestimated, when I was an agent, I knew like, hey man, having to perform is tough. The regular grind, it's a lot to go through. And I didn't really estimate actually how much that was a drain versus not having that. So what, 15 years, something like that. I had Eric Church's Creeping as the ringtone for my phone. And then I'm walking through a store and the song's playing. And so I'm grabbing for my bureau phone. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't do that anymore. Nobody's calling me. But like, always on call. I'm on
Yeah.
SWAT, my phone's next to the bed, you know. Now my personal phone's next to the bed and I'm playing Scrabble with my kid. Like that's all it is. So the relief of there's being that guy was like such a thrill, but being that guy was also such a burden. So I'm enjoying I'm missing that. I'm chatting with some of my buddies still, and I miss the action. I miss the brotherhood, but I'm also missing all that harm, all the stuff that it does to your psyche,
Yeah.
having to perform for so long.
That's um you deal with a version of hyper um, vigilance as well,
Mhm.
especially coming out of and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's something I you'll hear me say a couple words: survival mode, and a little bit of that carried over from childhood into my world. So just kind of living too long in survival mode, which is a product of just operators as well. But then the hypervigilance is, we have this tendency when you're getting ready to go to the grocery store, you got an ops plan. You're like, all right, if we get down to this intersection, this block, we're going to be going right here. This is our next plan. So those are some of the other things that I would point out to you as well to become self-aware of just how you move throughout your day from the technician standpoint. I don't know whether you catch yourself doing any of your old skills or not, but that was one of my things. I was doing heat runs to the babysitter.
Yeah, I mean, I still enjoy looking at, buildings and rooms and thinking, "This is how we would attack it. Here's the proper footwork." But also, 3 months retired, I haven't pulled my gun out. It I don't like, there's guys who are like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm still gonna wear it when I," and there'll be a time I'm sure there'll be times where I do put it back on because I'm authorized to as a retired federal agent, but I'm not that person. So I'm not gonna cosplay as that person. Like, I'm not gonna dress up in my SWAT outfit just to go like, "Yeah, I used to be really tough, and maybe somebody will buy me a coffee." Like, when I was wearing my, SWAT uniform and people like, "Yeah, it's on me, thanks for what you
Right.
do." Like, that's nice, that's honorable, but I'm not gonna try to relive that. I am now somewhere else doing something else.
There's something to, in folks way, hopefully, as the more we can have these conversations, it becomes easier for folks to make that transition. I have a lot of, when I say a lot, I could probably say at least 5 or 6 friends that have retired, and a couple of them came to me and, hey, just this is where I'm headed. And I was like, do you want to go back in a part-time role at your department, or are you planning on burning the boat, as we like to say? And like, Jeff, I want to burn the boat. And I go, you got to change your cell phone number. Very first thing, change your cell phone number as soon as you retire. I'm like, well, then I won't have any of my friends. I go, here's what you don't understand. Your friends will get that number. The department's going to call you within a month and say, hey, come back and work part-time, do this role or what have you. And I said, just all these dreams of business building and all the things, these are here. But what you're going to do is your identity is wrapped up over here, and they're going to pull you back into that side of it. And it happens a lot with my friends here because they're good. They're such great people, and
Yeah.
the department loves them being there. But in their world, they wanted to get on to the next phase of their life, but they didn't set themselves up to where there's enough barriers in place to keep them from being pulled back into the program.
Right, and I have seen for me that that's a necessity. Like, I can't. Well, I mean, there's no part-time work
Yeah.
for guys like me in the FBI, but like, I'm not looking to try to be that person anymore. I will say though, it was a couple years back. We were doing a SWAT operation in a different division. We're helping out like a big roundup, and these are agents that I haven't met because they're from a different division, and so as their search team is getting ready, we'd cleared the house. I was talking to the team leaders to let them know, like, hey, this is what the place looks like. Here's how the subjects were acting. And the one guy comes up, he goes, all right, he goes, yeah, Mike, you stay here and get the lowdown. And I look at him and it was my suite mate from the FBI academy. I hadn't seen the guy in 25 years, and I'm like, dude, you retired 3 years ago. How are you here? And he goes, oh yeah, I retired, and I came on with the sheriff's department, and now I'm a task force officer. And I thought that's really cool. And then now I look at it, having been retired, and I go, nah, nah. You know, you're just hanging on. You
Yeah.
know, you're breaking up with your girlfriend, but you're like, yeah, but maybe now and then we can get together. I'm not an alcoholic anymore, but sometimes I like to get drunk. Like it just for me, it has to be clean.
Yeah. I like the way you said that. I'm not an alcoholic anymore, but sometimes I need to get drunk. Um, you put a lot of effort into a book, though. Tell me, walk us through kind of what your creative process, or maybe where your influence is coming, what you'd like to accomplish with the book, because I think that's something, Eric. I think that's something for anyone that has a good career in law enforcement, even a bad career in law enforcement. There's some stories, and I think there's an opportunity to leave. And in my world, it's like an opportunity for you to tell your story, and you leave it for the groups that's coming back up, so they get an idea of what it's like. It's way more accepted now. We got AI that helps us write books off of the stories that we get to tell and talk about, but that's something else that I think helps fill the gaps for folks that are retired, and they just want to clear the air, get it off of their chest. And what does that look like for you?
Well, it was remarkably easy. So I enjoy writing. I liked writing reports and memos. I did it well, so I like putting things together. So we're getting near retirement. I asked my wife, "Hey, what should I do?" She says, "Oh, you should write a book." And I thought, "Yeah, but I didn't write down the stories, and I felt like I missed that opportunity to like get ready for that end of career book." But here's the thing: we tell these stories all the time, and so I sat down, like, okay, let me start with this story, and it just comes. And here, I wrote too much. I had to go back working with editors, like, hey, is this paragraph actually necessary? Can we trim this somewhere, or can we get rid of that? And I think, yeah, great. But it's just story after story of like, here's this investigation. I open up with, I mean, I tell my story. This is me as a pastor. This is me meeting the wife. This is me getting in the FBI, and then we get into these investigations. First story is me sitting at dining room table of a pastor who had been involved in a sex trafficking ring, and here is me as a former pastor talking to a guy who's soon to be a former pastor, and bringing a very literal come to Jesus speech to him. And this guy is, I mean, this showed his mentality where he says, "Hey man, I don't want to hear your sermons. I don't want to hear the Bible verses. I'll talk to you, but I'm not bringing Jesus into this," which was exactly what he had done. Like, this is the guy who preaches on Sundays, and Jesus ain't involved in the man who's having sex with underage girls. Like,
Yeah.
we're going to talk. If I'm going to talk, you're here. You're not here for the pastor. You're here for the man who did that stuff. So many stories. The stories are crazy. The stories are interesting. The stories I think are touching. And then hopefully you enjoy this too. I finish each chapter with an after action review where we're
Yeah.
going back and saying, this is why this worked. Here's how we almost screwed up. Here's how we did screw up. And just review of this is this is how an FBI case worked, and now we're gonna think about it. And all of it is a thread of this is a Baptist pastor doing all this stuff along the way.
Dude, that's a I love the way that you're putting that in with the after action. And I didn't I was always kind of it shows your vulnerable moments, but like we all have these things. So, man, if I could do that over again, and we used to do it. Every folks in operational type stuff is when you were done, you're immediately critiquing,
Hmm.
your entry, your deployment, all the things that needed to be, and just how sometimes just the flow of all things to see what you can do to be better and be safer for everybody, not just us. So dude, that's a really great approach of like, hey, these are some key takeaways, and I'm hoping you're tying in some, maybe some additional leadership lessons in there as well, because you can't go through your experience and not be a qualified leadership expert.
Well, I tell you that so the after actions were done for SWAT. And then it wasn't in my experience later until that was now squad work too of like, hey, SWAT does this and that's seems to be useful. Let's do it as well. But I'll tell you, like, we're going through a house, everybody's safe, but Billy over there definitely screwed up. Nobody's calling him out because that guy is first to say as we do the after action, guys, let me start with this, man. I totally screwed up. I needed to do this, but instead I did that. Like that's where you see that morale, that attitude, that environment where people are number one in line to say, me, I did that. I'm taking ownership. And boy, that makes such a difference. The next guy, new guys come on the team, they're not hiding. New guys are like, this makes me look incompetent, but I did that. That's me.
I preach that. I coach baseball, and I preach that's one of our. The kids will tell you, man. One of the first things we do. I used to do it. I've changed it a couple of different ways. Now, as soon as the game or practice is over, hey, what did we do good? Talk to me. Give me some. Give it back to me. Tell me something you saw someone else do good, and then we say, all right, tell me where you need help and where you fell short. And I could tell them as they've gotten older, I could tell them it's owning your shit. But I'm real quick to point out, like the faster I can teach you guys to take ownership, you're going to go so much further. You're going to go faster of just being able to own things and know that when I ask you to own it, I'm not looking for consequence. I'm going to develop something that's going to make sure that I can set you up for better success, and you're going to help me be part of that development. That's all.
Yeah.
Super powerful, man, when you apply that in other areas of life. And I'm saying this, Eric, to point out to the other folks that are out there where I struggled was all I knew was undercover work. I didn't understand that you have great communications, you have negotiation skills, you have this skill, you've developed this. I had someone sit down with a piece of paper and drew a line from what you know now, and this is how it applies to business many years ago. And I was having my own little FBI light bulb moments, going, oh, okay, that makes sense, because I didn't understand it because I had done nothing but public safety. So just point being of how those skills that you did in SWAT from an after action applies on a baseball field and a
Oh yeah.
boardroom and an operational thing. So just helping people discover new identities based off of their past experiences. Because, dude, I know a lot of cops that their self worth is you can measure it in a thimble, because they're just down and out because of just the way they've been treated or the job and stress and depression and all the other stuff that rolls into their life.
Yeah, and to me, it kind of goes hand in hand. We're like you see some NFL superstar, and the great ones are the ones who are like, yeah, they're humble. They don't need to praise themselves because everyone else does, and they know where they sit. And what was great with the SWAT team is we knew we were good. You could see how good we were as we're doing training, where guys are just moving and taking their place. They don't even have to talk. Everybody's doing things great. And because you're good, you're like, oh, that's easy. I can own that. Like, I know I'm not incompetent, and so when we would train agents, sometimes there would be that pushback because they didn't feel like, I'm not as good as you. And that's where it comes in. If your self-worth isn't high enough, now the defensiveness rises because you're touching a little too close. I already don't feel good. And so it's a crazy thing where when you are that good, it's much easier to say, okay, I'm going to own this. When you feel fine about yourself, so simple to do that. So sometimes it's because you are successful, and sometimes it's just I got to have this attitude where I'm not perfect, but I'll take those critiques so I can build on it and be better.
Yeah, and I was a young guy, I didn't understand that. I was
Hmm.
defensive. I thought everything was an attack. Try to work really hard now to push to stress that to young folks that are coming up like, nah, man, it's not attack. Hey, it's just the way we got to pull all the layers back, put the cards on the table, and nobody's attacking you. You're just you're receiving the information wrong. And this we all go through it. Just I don't know whether you did as a preacher going into the FBI. You probably had a moment where you're stood there red faced, like, wait a minute. Um, but I've had many of them, and now I laugh at them when I watch other guys go through it.
Well, I had one specific man in my church who would talk to me afterwards. I don't know if I had asked him to or if he just knew that was his role, where he'd say, "Hey, Eric, when you said that one joke during the sermon, I think that might have been a little off." And I go, "Okay, yep, yep, you're right." So he was the one there to call me on it, and I knew where his heart was. So that's great. I'm not going to argue with him that I shouldn't have told a fart joke in church or whatever it might be. It's good to have those people, but I had to be receptive too.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta, and that comes along with a little bit of just finding the right room, right people. When I hit the during my federal task force time, I was very much a sponge, um, and really appreciated the feedback um, and then I've always been a product of really good mentors and people that were around me. Of very patient with me while I was growing up. I had because it just took me longer to grow up than it did everybody else, but it's just who I was, dude. It's your book in the process too. I was going to ask you, did you pull any? Did you file any FOIAs to get any docs to go in there, or did you just write it all from memory? And then the other thing, just walking with me on this is did how was the vetting process through the FBI to get your book wrote? I was curious about that.
Yeah, it's funny that you're one of the few people who acknowledges like, oh yeah, you probably got to submit that. So no FOIAs. I just wrote it
Yeah,
from, hey man, this is my experience. And yeah, I always figured like, well, if I got it wrong and there were two guys and not three, like that's fine. You get the whole point. Like
yeah,
this is what went on. Like we charged in and did this. But it is, it's been with the FBI for, well, whatever, 4 months now,
yeah.
to review, make sure I'm not sharing state secrets or tradecraft, which I knew they were going to have to do that anyway. So purposely, I'm keeping things out. I mean, most of the story is not like here's some crazy tech adventure. This is this person and that person and this person. Like it's a people story of what we did, the victims we worked with, some of my partners, some of the informants. I did do a chapter on informants, and there was one informant that was always ribbing me. So I gave them all names from what's that Tarantino? Reservoir
Yes,
Dogs.
yeah.
So and purposely I gave him Mr. Pink just to kind of piss him off.
So that's I was curious about that because there's other folks like I've had some I've had different folks come on about trying to figure out how to write a book and editing and just in some of my previous episodes and stuff. And when you get into this federal service of what you all do, just knowing that there's a vetting process that you go through there, and then I've toyed with mine. I wrote it. Wrote it as a comic book. I wrote a couple chapters as a comic book, playing with that because it's no one. I don't know that anyone had kind of done that. So
Mm,
I made a little comic book superhero out of it. I played with that a little bit, and then I wrote it as fiction with all. It's all factually fiction, if that makes
right,
sense, right?
right. No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So there's a couple different ways, folks, that you can do that. When Eric, when's that book on the land? I know you're in the vetting process, but are you thinking fall or late
Yeah,
summer? Or
yeah.
what?
It'll be out. So my wife's company, Weaving Influence, has been marketing authors for 14 years. So naturally, she says, "Hey, you should write a book," because that's what's always in her head. And uh, a couple of paying customers jumped the line ahead of me, so we have to wait for them, but it should be out in early October. And then I talked to my wife about, hey, this is what the audiobook's going to look like, and I'm going to try to get. I'm reading it myself, but I'm going to try to get some other FBI agents to give their point of view too.
Yeah.
So this was a squad case. My buddy worked it, but this is how I saw it, and this is how it went. And I'm going to read the chapter, and then, hey, give me 4 or 5 minutes of your perspective of like
Yeah.
how you remember the case. And then last weekend, I'm driving back, and I go past a federal correctional institution, and I'm like, I got some guys in there.
Mm-hmm.
I, that'd be awesome because one of them's a guy was a terrorist. Like
Yeah.
we caught him before he killed people. That'd be great. Like let me
Yes.
get a few minutes of his perspective on, hey, remember when you were going to go kill a bunch of people? Here, talk about that because
Yeah.
I mean he's pleaded guilty, so nothing
Eric,
more to do there.
you're all right. So you're on point with. Have you listened to David Goggins' book?
No.
Can't hurt me. All right. So if you listen to the book, his I'm not going. I don't whatever role it was, but the guy reads it and then they do a podcast of interaction. So similar to what you're talking about. If you grab listen to
Yeah.
some clips of his stuff, you'll find something that's out there. I just know that he's somebody that had done it. And then I worked a couple different cases where I got really close to just friends that I knew, and that's one of my ideas as well. Is I'm gonna now when I have a couple guys that come on my podcast that were in the drug business. One of them was a drug user, real candid guy from out in Texas, John Wildsmith. He comes on from time to time, and he'll tell his story as a drug user and during the age. And I go, well, this is what it looked like from the law enforcement side during that time, and this is what was going on in our world. He'd be like, well, this is the way we was trying to avoid that. So those, dude, I could tell you, man. There was a couple other guys that I stumbled on Twitter that I was like, I reached out for them that were just telling under pseudonames, and they were just telling their times of drug trafficking. I was like, hey, don't come on camera. Let's just have a conversation about your career as a drug trafficker. And so I've toyed with that as well. Great idea, man. Definitely a great idea.
So in the book too, like as I said, I'm telling the story of this is a Baptist pastor who ended up being a SWAT operator, and so I think it's second to last chapter. I go to my wife who has written her own book as well. I said, "Give me a chapter. Give me a chapter what it was like for you as a wife of an FBI agent." And I always tell the story of like, so we're in Chicago and my wife's, like, hey, text me when you're safe. I'm worried about you. And I would tell the wife, like, look, I'm not getting shot. If I die out here, it's from a car accident or a heart attack, So we go through that. And then years later, I've been in SWAT for years. And I tell the wife, hey, we got an op coming up on Wednesday. And she says, okay, I'll put it in the calendar. And I go, well, I mean, the guy's kind of dangerous. She says, yeah. And I said, he told an informant he won't be taken alive. And she says, I told you I'd put it in the calendar. What do you want? So she went from like, I'm so nervous for you because this was all new to her to like, you come home every time.
Let me know. All the time.
Let me know if it's early morning or late night. You always come back.
She's another good one to think about plugging in a little bit because that's John's wife is going to come on the show. I had to pause during baseball season to record. That's why I told you, like, my first guy that's been back up in several months, and his wife's going to come on. Your wife's perspective of living. Her role and her part of your story is a whole nother side of it. So there's tons of value inside of that one as well. Michael Francine's Italian guy. He's a four times mob boss.
Okay.
He's got a top rated podcast now. He does something similar to what you're talking about. He has good guys and bad guys. Come on, former maid guys come on his show. He has FBI guys. He had some of the Donnie Brasco, I think's been on his show, and they just sit down and laugh and tell stories about cat and mouse and each other.
Well, so let me introduce this really quick. And I don't know if he told this or if you heard it, but years ago, I had a buddy go through the academy. I met him later, so because he was younger than me. He said he goes to the academy, and first day, well, all the time you've got your name placard in front of you for all the new agents, and at Quantico, there's one up front, and it says Donald Brasco, and the instructor says, "Son, do you have any idea what that name means in the FBI?" And he said, "Yeah, that was my uncle." So Joe Pistone took his nephew's name as his undercover, and then nephew ended up being an FBI agent.
FBI too. That's awesome. That's a cool story, man. He's one of the ones I followed when I was young in my career, just tips and tricks. And then one of the best books I ever read early on when you were coming on the job was Mafia for Dummies. There was a Mafia for Dummies, and I picked that thing up back in the 2000s, and I read
Mhm.
it, and it went through some of their things and structure. So that was one of my favorite books that I used to turn to people like, how'd you understand? How'd you get to know this stuff? How'd you get to know this? I'm like, I read this Mafia for Dummies book back then, dude. Hope we can catch back up. I
Yeah.
want to value your time here. I'm glad you got to connect with me. I'm absolutely happy that you've retired and that you're on your way. And I appreciate your approach to how you're still trying to figure out what retirement life is look like, and but you're also self-aware enough of that identity. This new identity matters. And a lot of folks don't get that, man. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I have today is that you might not be into this whole new role as retired Eric, but you're making progress, and you're headed that way, and you're figuring it out. And I hope that other folks that hear this and listen to it and get to know you, and as you and I catch back up as your book's getting ready to be released, or what have you, man. I really hope that's probably one of the bigger takeaways from this episode is that this is just a new life coming for you, and you got all sorts of new cool stuff that you're going to go accomplish because you started it as this preacher, and through headaches and stress and all these other things, Eric, it put you into probably one of the most stressful jobs that became very fulfilling, and here you
So
are again,
fulfilling. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I got to meet the best people in the world in the
Yeah.
FBI. You'd think church, but FBI, best people.
Man, I posted your website in the chat for everybody to see there. Preacher to breacher.com.
Come on, man.
So
That's
folks,
good.
make sure yeah,
That's
that's a
good.
good one. Yeah, that's a real good one. And then tell everybody how you want folks to get in touch with you if they want to have you on their show, or whatever that looks like. Is website the best way, or you got socials, or what does that
Yeah,
look like?
website, socials. It's crazy. Like I never had Instagram other than to lurk on bad guys, but I get Instagram this year and underscore Eric underscore Robinson. That was available. Look at that. So they can hit me on Instagram, LinkedIn. I've had a couple people reach out on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, be on my podcast," or they can email me at swiftrobinson at icloud.com. I used to be fast. Used to be.
Keyword used to be. Keyword used to be according to Eric.
Yeah.
All right, I just put your Instagram and I dropped your LinkedIn in the chat. Those should be following right along with our live feed as well, folks. So if you got to this point and you're lost, look down in the chat or comment, and I'll pull those out and send those over to you as well. Eric, man, I'm excited for where you're headed, and I appreciate you giving me some time to learn more about you. And I can't wait to see where it ends up and have you back on here again soon.
Yeah, we'll be back.